You didn't feed them.
I wanted to, but everybody's like, you
Two of them might not be here.
I know that's right. Obviously somebody's feeding them because they're coming up here, they're like,
Yeah.
you've been traveling to the test, right? You having some anniversary gatherings? Oh, I saw pictures of that. Oh.
Oh, yeah, that's a nice one.
All right, we'll call the August 19th City Council meeting to order. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I know Councilman Hudson is going to be a few minutes late. He's at a open house for Valley High School. He's got to go back to work. So at this point, we'll sign in, and then when he gets here, we'll sign in again. So everybody sign in, please.
Sure.
4 members present.
All right, this is the time for citizens forum.
First, we'll approve the agenda.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Do I have,
There's no changes to the agenda.
all right, no changes. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All right. please vote.
4 yes.
All right. Now, we'll have citizens forum. So anyone in the audience, and then we'll go on line if anybody wants to talk. Please come to the podium if you're in the building, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. Rochelle Long, 106 11th Street, West Des Moines. I'm standing as the founder and president of Taste of the Junction. And so I just wanted to come to the council tonight for a couple things. One, to say thank you, City of West Des Moines, for supporting Taste of the Junction yet again. We're embarking on our 12th annual Multicultural Festival. We would not be able to do that without the support of the city and other sponsors. So I just want to publicly stand and thank the sponsors. Our presenting sponsor this year is Prairie Meadows. Our platinum sponsor is Bravo Greater Des Moines and the Business Record. The venue sponsor, Valor Ballroom. We're going to kick it off at the Valor Ballroom. Our pop-up museum and gallery sponsor is the West Des Moines Community Foundation. Our gold sponsors are West Bank, Polk County Board of Supervisors, Matt McCoy and Angela Connolly. Our silver sponsors are the West Des Moines Chamber, Green State Credit Union, West Des Moines Human Rights, Al and Sarah Wombo, Alonda Long, and Dr. Mary Chapman. Our community sponsors are the NAACP, Thirsty Pig, Jeff Hill Future All-American Basketball Camp, and Matt and Mallory McKinney so far. And I want to say there's still room and there's still time. If you want to support the festival, it will be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Labor Day weekend, August 29th, 30th, and 31st. You can get the information, more information on our website, tasteofthejunction.org. You can contact us at info@tasteofthejunction.org. If you would like to make a contribution, you still have time to have your name in the book. You can mail checks to Post Office Box 65131, West Des Moines, Iowa, 50265. We are excited to make this contribution to the city. It brings in a nice, diverse group of people from all around the region. People come from many states, 7, 8, 9 states. People fly in for this event. So they're checking into hotels. They're spending money while they're here. They go to Adventureland while they're here. They shop while they're here. So we feel like we're making an impact yet on even on the economy of West Des Moines. But just want to stand. I'm proud to stand here, invite everyone, thank everyone for giving us the opportunity to have the space in the city.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you, Rochelle, and I know that it is a effort that is a team sport. You got a lot of people working. Please count me in as a sponsor, so let's chat tomorrow so I can continue to support this particular festival. It really does bring very diverse groups of folks together. It's a celebration of how West Des Moines got started. So I applaud you and your board for all the work that you all are doing to continue the legacy. So do count me in. Let's chat tomorrow.
Thank you. Anyone else before I sit? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chamber for Citizens Forum? Hearing none, I'll go online. Anybody online want to talk to Citizens Forum? Hearing none, we'll move to the item 3, Mayor, Council, City Manager report. First up, we have Tracy Glass, our library director, is going to give a annual report on the public library.
Do I stand here?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it's the first time I've been up here. Thanks for having me, Council. I'm very excited to be here. I just want to say, so I'd like to officially enter into the record the West Des Moines Public Library Annual Report for 23 and 24. It was very beautifully designed by our Library Information Coordinator, Maggie Martin, and she did all of this. And with input from all of staff as well, to put in our stats and to showcase what it was we were proud of. Now, I'll make this joke. I've already made this joke at multiple board meetings and the Friends Foundation meeting that I wasn't here for the majority of what was written about in this report, but I feel like I can speak to it because I followed it and really studied it in preparation for applying for and receiving this position. And I feel really lucky to be able to represent this staff and represent all the great work they did, because I was very excited and impressed by what they had done so far in this past year and the previous years that made me just want to work here so much. So I'm so happy to be here and happy to be representing them. I'm very happy to be joined in the audience by our board president, Long, and our Friends Foundation President O'Neill. Thank you for being here. They support us. I've never had such wonderful support from a board and a Friends Foundation in my entire career. So we are very lucky to have the support of those two organizations. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I was very excited about. So we have the latest statistics on our WOW vehicle. So we got our WOW vehicle during this year, and that's our Words on Wheels vehicle. And we're really trying to learn how to use this vehicle well, because this is the first year we'd had it. So we sent it out over the summer. We went to parks. We partnered with Parks and Rec and went to their ice cream socials. We took it to Rose Farm and different outreach events. Overall, we did 51 events with our WOW vehicle. We had 2,961 attendees visit us at our WOW vehicle, and we had 469 checkouts. And that was just over the course of 2 months. So that was just June and July. So that was very exciting for us. Summer reading. Summer reading is always very important in the public library, and I'm happy to say we had a 27% increase in our signups this year for summer reading, most notably with our adult readers, and that is really due to the work of our adult services coordinator, Jen, who has done a fabulous job of planning programming and making things really accessible for our adults. So we are very proud of her and that program. Additionally, you'll see Betsy right here. Betsy does our senior care facility outreach. She is a specialized position that is partly, that is funded by the Friends Foundation, which we are very appreciative of, because she serves all of our memory care facilities and residential homes in West Des Moines, which is very important. I've never seen anything. She keeps asking me about things I can offer to help her to expand or improve the service, and I can't, because I literally have never seen this kind of work done before in a library. It's very revolutionary, and she is on the cutting edge of being able to train people how best to serve our people, truly from birth until death, and she is a fabulous person. We just had our 20th deposit collection installed this past year, which is huge. We are at capacity now. She is our one person that does this work, and we keep having people ask us to have more deposit collections and have her visit. She does bed-to-bed visits as well, and we just don't have the capacity. That's how popular and well-loved this program is. Finally, the other thing I'll mention is our accessibility team, which is made up of staff from around the library, most notably my assistant, Susan Greenwood. They have put together a whole list to put on our website to showcase how accessible our libraries are. And that's everything from those who are deaf and hard of hearing, vision impaired, who are on the spectrum, all the different ways that we can be accessible, they have put together in a list, and we'll be rolling that out to staff and the public. And the greatest thing was they wrote a proposal for a program on how to do this work, and it got accepted by the Iowa Library Association. So they'll be presenting that at conference this year. Because I think in libraries we think, well, if you have to have a lot of money to do these things, or you have to have a lot of extra staff or dedicated staff. And this accessibility team I'm very proud of, because they did all of this just in their day-to-day work. They did it just grassroots with the money and the budget we had and the time that they had, and they put together this really wonderful accessibility document. Moving forward, so looking into the future, we're going to be revitalizing our kiosk, which is funded by our Friends Foundation, which we love. It's in Valley Junction. We've rewrapped it so it matches our WOW vehicle and our outreach vehicle, which is nice because we've created a whole brand around that. And then also I'm looking to grow all the relationships with my fellow directors and grow those partnerships across the city. The library is usually kind of an anomaly. We stick out a little bit just because we're a little different than everybody else, so I appreciate everyone being very kind and welcoming to me. And I am open to any questions if anybody has questions about our report or anything we reported in that this year.
One quick question. What do you see as the biggest strategic challenge that the library faces today?
I think that's a great question. I think strategically and in all the libraries I've worked in, it's really, we are being looked upon to be all these different things to everybody in our community. And we want to help people. And we are a trusted source, and people come in to see us, but often a lot of the work, and which is what I really love about the city, we have a human services department, which I've literally never seen in my life, where we can partner with them and kind of balance that compassion fatigue and that kind of overwhelming want for us to help people, but also recognizing that we aren't fully trained to do a lot of that work, but we can help guide people. So making sure that we keep our place in the city as a library and wanting to grow and wanting to be innovative, but also keeping in mind that there are other people that do it better than us, and we can welcome those people in with partnerships or go out to them with partnerships and fully serve the community in a way where it's not just kind of all on us all the time. Yes.
First of all, welcome.
Thank you.
And, we're happy to have you.
Me too.
And I actually just love our library.
Thank you.
I used to almost live there.
It's wonderful.
Go there a lot and find it a very, very welcoming place, and just love the atmosphere of it. Have you done any benchmarking in your news? So maybe this is something that is forthcoming that might be libraries our size in other municipalities and other states or whatever, to compare these numbers to in terms of, are they good, are they just average, or how do we compare metrics with similarly situated size communities and libraries?
So we're currently doing that. So I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, this library system redid their strategic plan and pushed out a fully fleshed out strategic plan with benchmarks, which is really wonderful, because I'm walking into a strategic planning document where we have an admin team meeting every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, we're going through all those benchmarks and measuring, and I'll use things like per capita and use all these different, or the funds spent per capita or people per capita, what kind of numbers we're seeing from year to year, and we can track that over time, and then we share it with our Friends Foundation and our board. Just upon first glance, just looking at this, I came from Lincoln, Nebraska, so we were an 8-branch system, a bigger city, but we didn't see the rates of growth, I don't think, that I'm seeing in this system now. And it's really evident how much our community cares for and values this library system, which, again, I've been in communities where people really say they love their libraries, but it's not always reflected in how we were funded or how we were supported. So that coming here, it's been really, really just, it touches my heart to see how people really support us and then also back it up. But looking at the numbers, they all look really good, but we'll continue to track those and then report them back.
Okay. And lastly, I just want to say, take this opportunity to really compliment the staff at the library. It's a really busy place, and I watch what's going on. I also receive service there, and people are incredibly nice, very helpful, very resourceful. So the staff that you have is really remarkable.
They are. Thank you. They are fabulous. Thank you.
Tracy, what are the numbers at the kiosk down in Valley Junction?
Who said that?
Me.
Oh, sorry.
It was echoey.
I think I've got a face still.
Sorry, repeat. Will you repeat the question? Sorry.
What's the number usage at the kiosk? I know when that got implemented, there was a strong desire down in Valley Junction to have a second library down there.
Yes.
And so the Friends Foundation opted to go with the kiosk.
Yes.
And I know it was extremely well used. I presume it still is.
I consider it well used, and I think, but what we're doing is we're going to grow that usage, and we have a whole plan that we're going to do that later this year. So we're going to have an ice cream social. We've rewrapped it so we can create that brand and people can associate it with our other vehicles. And, unfortunately, it just came in at a time when they were doing from my understanding, they were doing construction back there and renovating that back plaza. And so it was well used, but it could have been better used but there was a lot of construction going on and the parking was limited. Now it's totally opened up. There's seating areas, and we are doing a fully like a full effort to reach not only residents of Valley Junction, but churches and different businesses in Valley Junction, knowing that people come into that area on Sundays and driving them to that kiosk, and really just having that party for it that we weren't able to have when we wanted to have it due to the construction. So that's where we're really hoping to grow more and more users. But we're pleased with the usage of that kiosk. I really love that kiosk. And when we were there, I was there at 2 farmers markets with Betsy and Maggie. And Betsy always just did a great job when people asked about our brand. She would just walk them over to the kiosk. And a lot of times people are like, oh yes, I do use this. I love this. But a lot of times people are like, oh, I didn't know this was here. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is just up the visibility. Yes, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Tracy? All right, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, council reports. Councilman Loach, you have anything?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Councilwoman Hardman?
I just want to say thanks to Catherine and her team for hosting what I consider a very nice visionary luncheon last Thursday, where they had 6 community leaders talking about workforce issues and skilled workforce issues. So kudos to Catherine. I just left her. They're taking pictures for the 515 magazine for another insightful lunch that had over 100+ people there.
Wow, excellent. Councilman McKinney?
Thank you. Yeah, just a few items here for the benefit of the group. We had a Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting the last week, and just wanted to let everyone here know that one of the items that was on the docket was a carbon reduction program fund. MPO has about a little over $5 million available for the CRP funding. And so we established a process whereby the MPO will be able to work with its member jurisdictions to be able to have an application process where, for example, City of West Des Moines could apply for some of that funding in the past. We have been able to receive funding through the Clean Air Attainment Program relative to our streetlights. And so just letting you know that there will be an opportunity coming up. I think at the end of August is when we're looking at releasing the application process so the City of Des Moines will be able to participate. We had, Councilwoman Hardman and myself had a pretty extended development and planning meeting this morning. And I think it's important that I update you all on what happens at those meetings, just so you have line of sight to some of the things that are going on. And there's a few developers in the room, and so this might, you might find it interesting. The first item we talked about was about screening, planting shrubs and other greenery to block mechanical devices, electrical boxes, and other things. And there are several projects that have failed to adequately screen. And so the question is, what do we do as a city? We have an ordinance that say you shall do it, but we don't have folks that are complying. And the message this morning was, we have an ordinance, we should enforce it. And so, of course, we're always going to aim to be reasonable. We want to work with folks, but when we have something on the law that says you got to travel 35 miles an hour, if you don't travel that speed, it's going to be enforced. And the same is true when it comes to screening. So that'll be something that will be ongoing, and hopefully we'll see greater compliance going forward. The second topic was materials, and this has been a touchy subject at the state legislative level, because this last session there were some bills related to the use of vinyl siding on single-family homes. We had a conversation this morning about what are we going to allow as it relates to products that look like wood. So we have hardy plank and vinyl plastic that looks like wood. Will we allow metal in the city of West Des Moines that looks like wood? The half-hour plus discussion on this topic ultimately resulted in, at this point in time, I haven't had any complaints over the last, say, 5 years, 4.5 years that I've been here, relative to the type of siding. And so I think at the end of the day, and Councilwoman Hardman indicated she, too, had not had significant or any contact on that. We're going to continue going down the path that we have over the last several years, being reasonable, working with developers on the type of siding. We're mindful of what it means for costs. We talk a lot about trying to find ways for more affordable housing to exist in the community. And so what does that mean in terms of siding? We're also mindful as it relates to durability. We don't have something be built and then be blown down the next 70-mile-an-hour wind that happens to hit once a month anymore. So it was an interesting discussion, and it's something where it was more like, hey, we've had good luck, we've had good development, we haven't had problems, let's continue doing what we're doing. But I'm sure that as the development community continues to explore advances in technology, one or multiple of us will get contact, and we'll probably have that conversation down the road. And then the last item we had really relates to signage, and I know that similarly, the development community is very interested in how do we sign certain things. I've had many folks approach me about some frustration on development related to signage and what can be done. One of a couple examples that were raised this morning is, if you haven't seen it, there is a sign that is atop or near the top of the new Grimaldi's located in West Glen. It's an electronic sign, electronic board, whatever you want to call it. It shows advertising and imagery of pizzas and pepperoni and all these things. Question is, can we have that in the city because of additional signage that's on that building? So I believe we're going to bring it to a full council work group sometime in September. And unfortunately, because of what happened this morning, the sign that's at Grimaldi's is going to be shut off because it is in violation of our current law, despite the fact you can't see it from a city street. The message this morning was that sign needs to go off for the very reason I talked about earlier. If we have a law in the books, we got to enforce it. So we're enforcing it, but it is my desire to bring that before the full council to explore what do we do with digital signs in the community? What do we do with signage requirements in terms of square footage? What can be reasonable? I think in my experience, as I've seen that sign in West Glen, it doesn't seem to be out of place. It doesn't seem to be unreasonable. It doesn't certainly seem to be out of place in the particular area. So that'll be for the full council to further evaluate during a workshop likely in September. I'm hoping we can do it on September 3rd, early in September, so we can help this business and other businesses with issues on those items. But that's my report. Thanks so much. Your Honor, may I ask a question to the council members on that committee?
Yeah.
And maybe you have staff, and maybe it's something to think about, but how are occupancy permits getting issued for buildings that don't comply with ordinances that have been on the books for a while? Because you would think that people would know about them, and staff especially should know that we should have proper screening around HVAC or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Fair question. What's that?
Should Lynn?
Yeah. Lynn, come forward and
Yep,
address
that'd
that.
be great.
That we have.
While she's coming forward, I had a question on that as well. Does that also include dumpsters? Because we've got a number of buildings throughout the entire city of West Des Moines that their dumpsters are sitting in their parking lots, not screened.
Lynn Tweet, Director of Development Services. What we run into is we have a temporary occupancy permit and we have final occupancy permits. We get a lot of pushback when the building is ready to go, it's been signed off on fire, it meets all building code requirements, and we say you can't occupy that building because you haven't screened your mechanical units, you don't have your dumpster done, you don't have X, Y, and Z. So oftentimes they get that temporary, and then it's a matter of trying to get them to do what they need to do. Once they're in the building, we don't get a lot of cooperation. So unless we're willing to really hold a hard line and keep people out of the building till all of these things are done, that's the game we play. And yes, it takes time, and you get busy with other things and they fall through the cracks for a while. We try to go back to them and get them. It's just
So is there
checking.
not a very good enforcement process that we've enabled you with as a council, like fining somebody if they don't do that kind of stuff?
It's really hard, and this would probably be a legal question, but it's really hard when they have that open building permit technically. So unless we want to say that temporary is going to expire in 90 days and we are kicking you back out of the building, we're shutting off your water, we're doing whatever to get these other things done, it just keeps getting kicked, the can gets kicked down the road. And, you know, staff will do what we want. We don't really enjoy going out and beating up people and trying to say you have to get out of the building, nor would we surprise. In the past, there's been no council support to say we're going to keep somebody out of the building. If they're ready to go and fire and building's all good with it, let them in there.
It would seem to me, though, that if we're not willing to enforce the ordinances, we probably shouldn't have the ordinance in the first place.
That's right.
That's exactly what we talked about this morning. So we opted to enforce as opposed to eliminate. Tom, can we take this off, or however you guys want to handle it? Like, this is silly.
I'd like to add to that because this was a very robust meeting this morning. And I'm just going to be as candid as I can. You know, we have staff that are really working diligently on trying to hold people's feet to the fire. And let's not make no bones about it. When they are in a position to try to enforce what they need to enforce, there are people that call, people like us on these councils to try to find ways to find exceptions. And we spent time this morning on a person that knows about a sign that's inside their building, inside the window, knowing that there were signage issues that they covered themselves. And we need to spend time with our assistant attorney who has sent notice that said that sign is not legal. And we got staff saying, what should we do? Because this person is asking for an exception, and once we make an exception for that person, it's an exception for another, it's an exception for another, it's an exception for another. So while it sounds crazy that someone would have to take down or shut off the sign temporarily, an ordinance is an ordinance is an ordinance. Either you're complying with it or you're not complying with it. And we've got to be fair, and we've got to let staff be empowered to enforce. We spent 45 minutes, quite frankly, this morning trying to see whether staff trying to gauge us on whether we're going to allow them to enforce the code. We've got to be consistent ourselves, and we've got to allow the staff to be able to say, no, we told you about this sign. It's inside until we as a team decide that that ordinance doesn't work or that ordinance is crazy. We've got to make sure that we back them up. So I'm passionate about this because I witnessed some of this morning, and I felt bad that here it is, we're trying to make a decision on whether or not that sign should stay up, knowing that it's against ordinance, and if there's an opportunity for us to change it, then let's do our jobs and change it as a group if we need to do that. So my head goes off to planning and development in a lot of cases where they are driving themselves crazy trying to figure out, let me enforce, but if I enforce, what's going to happen to me because they're calling certain people or talking and whatever, and they're entitled to do that. But we have to be honest, it's a double-edged sword that they're in. And I really respect the conversation that we had today, and I'm really glad that we got to the point where what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Let's make sure that they're following the rules like everybody else.
If I could, just some additional perspective, back to Councilman Lotz's comment. I do agree, because I think Councilman Lotz was talking about the folks that are not putting the appropriate screening in place. How are they getting the building permit? I do think that we ought to look at ways to bring folks into compliance, whether it's through a fine, whether it's through some other mechanism. To your point, we have the ordinance on the books for a reason, and we should enforce it, or we should eliminate or amend our existing ordinance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Councilwoman Hardin, relative to the sign. Yeah, I mean, this actually, ironically, came up initially when the city of West Des Moines was looking at putting a electronic sign back in, I don't know, I'd say April timeframe. Ryan Penning brought forward an idea of putting a digital sign in a park. And we had a conversation at that point about what do we do with digital signage. And then when I heard that this particular business was unable to have a sign, it was at my request that we explore the issue to figure out what do we do with signage. And I heard it about this business. I heard it about another business around Jordan Creek that is not visible from a public street. And I felt it just seems a little outdated. Our own Parks and Rec department can't put up a digital sign for purposes of displaying where a softball game might be. And we have other, you go down 5th Street in Valley Junction and you see a TV that has advertising on it, and that's allowed. And so for me, without question, this morning was not about whether we enforce it. Today, the question was, do we explore a change? And of course we enforce the ordinance, and I think we should enforce the ordinance, but should we have a conversation? I think we ultimately landed where the two of us obviously aren't going to make the full decision, and it probably makes sense to bring this to the full body the council for a robust discussion, a work group where we can walk through, how we approach this. Maybe we don't change it. Maybe we don't allow digital signs, or maybe we open the door a bit. Obviously, hopefully we'll find out first part of September.
Well, I'd like to just, for the record, make sure that everyone also knows, I'm all for looking at ordinances that don't make any sense. I'm all for looking at things that create issues, unintentional issues that we're not aware of. But today's meeting this morning was almost about whether or not the staff go ahead and enforce it or they don't enforce it. That's what I got from that. And I'm glad we finally got to that. So make the record clear that I'm all for looking at ordinances that don't make sense, looking at unintentional consequences that don't make sense, that involve the full council making those kind of recommendations. Because as they showed us this morning, it's more than just that sign. It's what happens on the yellow, all the other different kinds of streets. So it's more robust. So I'm glad we got where we got. I just think it's important that we also understand the difficulties and the challenges that staff have in trying to enforce certain things. I think we all would agree with that. So I'm glad we got to the point where if we don't think that's right, then let's have a robust, full disclosed discussion about the impacts that it has beyond that one sign in its everything.
Yeah, the digital sign discussion, I don't remember, goes back when Russ and I first got on the council. And it was decided then by a majority of the council, not I, that we would not allow them. And then, if you remember over at Valley High School at the stadium, what's over there? Digital sign. There was some creative design work put together in order to allow that to happen. And so, yes, we do definitely need to look at ordinances that don't make sense. And this is one of them. So I'm glad that we're digging more into this.
Me too.
Before Lynn sits down, is there any other discussion or questions on this? Okay, I do have a question on the metal siding. So houses have aluminum siding on them, correct?
Yes.
Isn't that metal?
Yes, and it's not an issue that they want to use metal. The issue is when we're trying to find this balance between cost-effective, quality visuals, valuation of the community as a whole. So this metal, if you can have a material, vinyl, wood, different materials that actually has texturing to it, it has patterning in it, it looks, acts, and feels like wood, even though it might not be wood. Think of it as what we said this morning. Think of it as when you go to pick out hardwood flooring for your house. There's a whole gamut of what you can do from just what looks like a very smooth printed effect, where you kind of go, yeah, this really doesn't look like wood. It may be the same colors, to hand scraped, and it actually has texture and different pattern in it. This metal that they want to use has a photo just basically imprinted on it. So it's just a very smooth piece of metal that happens to have a wood picture on it. What we're saying is, if you want to use metal, just get rid of the wood picture and use the metal, or let's find you a material that has the texture and actually looks and feels like wood. We're not saying you can't have metal, we're just saying this photo applied metal it's not authentic enough to kind of get us to where you think should be, or where we believe the city wants to be. We look at the valuation of the area, we look at what everybody else does. If I build my building out of brick and the guy next door build his out of basically a photo panel, where do we start and stop? So that's kind of what was the discussion. It's not that they want to use metal. Yes, vinyl's used in certain places, but a photo applied vinyl that looks like wood or brick or stone just doesn't have that same level that I guess we were looking to say, is that really what the city wants? And all of these things really boil down to aesthetics and what do we want for the community as a whole.
Do you have a picture of that siding they're wanting to use?
Not with me, I don't.
Can you get that to me? I'd like to see it, because, I mean, there's brick veneer
Yep.
that's used out there, and that's not a full, thick
Nope, and
brick.
we're not saying you have
So-
to, because there is brick, there's full-fledged brick, there's lick and stick brick or the veneer brick. They're now starting to come out with a Hardy Plank and others that start having this, but you start losing a little bit of that authenticity to it. Stone is the same way. You can have a printed look, and it really doesn't achieve what you're wanting it to achieve. So we were asking about trying to find this balance of, we're not saying you have to use full brick, full stone. We're not saying that. We're saying there's ways to do it, save some money, but still have it look appropriate and be durable. And that's what we're trying to find, that balance. But yeah, we can get you a picture of what it is.
right.
It's just
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
kind of
Just
weird.
curious.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Councilman Hudson, well, before we move, shall we go sign back in?
Yep.
All right, let's sign back in since Councilman Hudson's here.
Five members present.
Councilman Hudson, you have any report?
Just one short report. At last Wednesday's Finance Administration Subcommittee meeting, we had a good discussion about Fuller Road, because if you travel on Fuller Road anytime when Southwoods is in session or getting ready to leave session, or Jordan Creek Elementary is getting ready to leave, begin or end the school day, it gets pretty trafficky on Fuller Road. So Councilman Lotz and I, we had a good discussion about the widening of Fuller to add a third lane in the middle. And I think that would be really, really helpful for the folks who are going to the elementary school, going to the high school, or at least Southwoods High School, as well as Valley Church, Valley Community Center. So I want to thank the staff for kind of looking at a proposal to widen that. But also, we were looking at the funding mechanism, and I think there are more discussions that are being had by City Manager Haddon, because we're trying to get the entities together to figure out what the pay structure would be. So I know those conversations are ongoing, but I'm sure we will be keeping everybody in the loop as those continue. So, but if you think Fuller Road's a little busy during school begin and school ending time, hopefully in the future we can see some relief in that regard. So, and that'll conclude my report, Mr.
All right.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. City Manager Haddon.
No report, Your Honor.
All right, moving on to consent agenda. Is there anyone, we're going to pull 4S, which is the Taste of the Junction proclamation, but is there any other items that the council wants to pull?
Move for the remainder.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded for the consent agenda other than 4S. Please vote.
5 yes.
All right, 4S is a proclamation for the Taste of the Junction, and let me get down here to it, please. All right, on our packet, it talks about this is the 12th year, as Rochelle Long had mentioned, for the Taste of the Junction Multicultural Festival event on Labor Day weekend that promotes the strength of our community and highlights one of the most diverse and multicultural communities in West Des Moines. Whereas the city of West Des Moines strives to be an inclusive and welcoming place for all residents, businesses, and visitors. And whereas the city of West Des Moines was incorporated as a railroad town in Valley Junction and attracted culturally diverse residents to the area for jobs in the cement and railroad industry. And whereas initially Europeans, African Americans, Serbians, and Mexicans settled in Valley Junction and created a multicultural community of families that lived, worked, and shared their cultural experiences. And whereas the annual Taste of the Junction Multicultural Festival seeks to preserve the history by hosting a 2-day festival for the community to come together to share, preserve, and celebrates the people, cultures, and cuisines that make historic Valley Junction a cultural hub for the region. And whereas this marks the 12th annual Taste of the Junction incorporated on Labor Day weekend, which promotes the strength of our community and families as they highlight one of the most diverse communities in West Des Moines, Valley Junction. Now, therefore, I, Kevin L. Trevelyan, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of West Des Moines, Iowa, do hereby proclaim Saturday, August 31st, 2024, as Taste of the Junction Day. Signed this 19th day of August, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please vote.
5 yes.
All right, let's go down front and we'll get a picture and present the President proclamation. All right, moving on to item 5. Item 5A, Angel Estates, 1500 South 60th Street, amend the zoning map to establish detached residential land use and single-family residential RS30 zoning, Angel Estates LLC. It's an ordinance for the third reading and approve the consistency zoning.
Motion to consider the third reading.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, please vote.
Four yes, one no. An ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of West Des Moines, Iowa, 2024 by amending Title IX zoning, Chapter 4 zoning districts and map.
Motion to approve the third reading and adopt in final form.
Second.
Any discussion? Please vote.
Four yes, one no.
5B, West Grand Business Park, north and south sides of Grand Avenue between South 60th Street and South 88th Street. Amend the West Grand Business Park Planned Unit Development Ordinance to modify regulations for parcels 3, 4, and 5 within the PUD for entertainment, commercial, and multifamily development. WDM Entertainment LLC. It's an ordinance for the approval of the second reading, waive the third, and adopt the amendment in the Planned Unit Development Ordinance.
Motion to consider the second reading?
Second.
Any discussion? Please vote.
Four yes, one abstention due to potential conflict of interest. An ordinance amending the city code of the city of West Des Moines, Iowa, 2024, and ordinance numbers 1373, 1812, 2299, 2359, 2360, 2446, 2460, and 2462 pertaining to plan unit development, district regulations, and guidelines.
Motion to approve the second reading?
Second.
All right, please vote.
Four yes, one abstention due to potential conflict of interest.
Motion to waive third reading and adopt in final form?
Second.
Please vote.
Four yes, one abstention due to potential conflict of interest.
All right, 5C, Valor Ballroom PUD, 301 Ashworth Road. Amend the Valor Ballroom Planned Unit Development Ordinance to allow additional iconic signage, VAB LLC. It's an ordinance for the approval of the second reading, waive the third, and adopt the Planned Unit Development Ordinance.
Motion to consider, second.
Second.
Any discussion? I just want to say that I'm anxious to see this lettering go up on that building. I think it's going to be an excellent addition to that historic building, and I'm glad to see that the new owners are trying to put it back to the way it originally was. Please vote.
It's not going to be digital, is it, Kevin?
No, neon. No, I think it's painted, actually. Painted. And their neon's already up.
No, it's going to be stamped with fake
Too
wood.
soon.
Five yes, an ordinance amending the city code of the city of West Des Moines, Iowa, 2024, and ordinance number 2595 pertaining to plan unit development, district regulations, and guidelines.
Move to approve second reading.
Second.
Please vote.
Five yes.
Okay. Motion to waive third reading and adopt in final form.
Second.
Please vote.
Five yes.
All right, 5D. Vacation request. Grand Avenue reconstruction project vacate 23,398 square feet of right-of-way of Grand Avenue, City of West Des Moines. To approval of the second reading, waive the third, and adopt in final form.
Motion to consider the second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please vote.
Five yes, an ordinance vacating 23,398 square feet of right-of-way of Grand Avenue.
Motion to approve the second reading.
Second.
Please vote.
Five yes.
Motion to approve the third reading and adopt in final form.
Second.
Please vote.
Five yes.
Item 6A, Westtown Residences, 3530 Westtown Parkway. The requested comprehensive plan, land use amendment and zone change for the Westtown Residences Hotel at 3530 Westtown Parkway has been withdrawn by the applicant. So,
Move to accept the withdrawal.
Second.
any discussion? Please vote.
Five yes.
7A, Forest Place, formerly known as High Point, generally north and south of future Stagecoach Drive extension and between South 81st Street and the future extension of South 85th Street. Approve a preliminary plat to create 101 lots for single-family residential development, 4 outlots and 5 street lots. High Point Group LLC. It's on approval for a preliminary plat.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just, I would just say this has come before development planning a couple different times. We work through some important characteristics as to how folks will enter off of South 81st Street to ensure that there is an ability for them to not have to back out onto South 81st Street. We also had a very robust discussion about the installation of a trail along South 81st Street and appreciate the approach that the developers had in, frankly, coming to the city and being able to go either way with the installation of that, either install the trail up front and do all the construction over the top or install the trail after. And so ultimately, as outlined here, they're going to install the trail at the outset. But it was a good approach, and I appreciated the way they handled it.
Yeah. I concur.
Any other discussion? Please vote.
Five yes.
Item 7B, amend city code to adjust storm water fees and charges. It's a ordinance for the first reading. Do I have a motion?
Motion to consider the first reading?
We're going to consider it, right?
Yeah, motion to consider the first
Yeah,
reading.
motion to consider.
Second.
Any discussion?
Sure, this came before Finance and Administration Subcommittee. I think when we discussed both 7B and 7C, which is the stormwater and then the sanitary sewer system, we were privileged enough to have Suzanne from PFM to join us and kind of really take the subcommittee through kind of the next 5 years and even 10 years on what the projections are for both stormwater and for the sanitary sewer. And there's a couple of different directions we could go. And I know and I'm kind of speaking about both stormwater and sanitary sewer right now. I know it's two separate things, but we have a choice to either increase these fees right now over the next couple of years when it comes to 25, 26, and 27. You can see the specifics in the packet. Or we have a choice of going into further debt to maybe service these future projects. And as we talk about some of these projects, I was looking at the Stormwater Enterprise Fund and some of the projected projects for 26-27, 27-28, and 28-29. For example, there's a Westtown drainage improvement to improve the capacity there. That's projected for 28 and 29. And I want to thank our city engineering department for really putting this together because, as we all know, our engineers plan things out really, really well. But that's a $7 million project. And so when it comes to how we finance this, how we are supposed to utilize the Stormwater Enterprise Fund the best, well, are we going to have enough money in the fund to pay for these directly? Or are we going to go further into debt? And with higher interest rates, the choice that I made at the subcommittee was to go with a scenario 2. And in your packet, it says scenario 1 and scenario 2 for I think that's the sanitary sewer one that we're talking about. In any case, to keep the Stormwater Enterprise Fund and the Sanitary Sewer Enterprise Fund strong, that's why I give my recommendation for these rate increases. And for single residents, it might turn out to be $6 a year. But for all the residents of West Des Moines, $6 a year to have a healthier and more robust stormwater system and sanitary sewer system. And yeah, the sanitary sewer system has also an increase. But to keep these infrastructural items in our city not just running well, but really top of the line, I am very, very supportive of doing these rate increases because we're doing a little at a time, and they are really serving a very, very important purpose. And that will be me stepping off of my soapbox on the importance of sanitary sewer and stormwater at this point. And I'm very supportive going forward.
Okay.
I'll add one comment to that. These are the kinds of things that people take for granted. And I've seen firsthand in other cities how they neglect to continue to maintain the infrastructure. And let me tell you, your perspective changes a lot when you can't flush the toilet in your home anymore. It changes a lot when you get 4 inches of rain and all of a sudden people's homes are flooded. So I'm very much in favor of this type of infrastructure and managing it and maintaining it appropriately, rather than going into debt, because then we'll have double the problem 20 years from now.
Yeah, you'd have destroyed properties as a result of the flooding, and then you'd have to come in and, after the fact, put in a much more robust system. So I just say thank you to both you, Councilman Hudson, and you, Councilman Rhodes, for going through this analysis. I note that we're over half the cost of what it is in Des Moines. And obviously, we're a growing community, and you've been able to do so and manage this in a way where, obviously working with engineering department with Brian to make sure that we have infrastructure in place and that we're doing it wisely. But it is important, and so thank you for the time you put into this.
And one thing further, looking at the residential metro stormwater rates, yes, we are half of what Des Moines is. We are quite a bit lower than Waukee. And while you might say, well, we're a little bit higher than Urbandale and Pleasant Hill, Norwalk, and Johnson, and other communities, our community as a whole, as we know from Valley Junction, as we talk about the history there, the reason why there's a history there is because this town has been here for a really, really long time. And since the town has been here for a long time, that is some older infrastructure that can always use updating for the reasons that are aforementioned. So, yeah, it is a little bit higher, but I think we have a lot more historical parts of the city that we need to maintain in a more robust way as well. So that's a reason why it might be a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense to raise it a little bit each year rather than going in debt or in a few years saying, uh-oh, and having a huge increase. Then we really would hear from the people. So again, thanks to Greg and Doug and the staff for their work on this. So, all right, please vote.
Five yes, an ordinance amending the city code of the city of West Des Moines, Iowa by amending Title IV, Chapter 8B pertaining to stormwater management charges.
Motion to approve the first reading.
Second.
Please vote.
We talked so much I couldn't remember who moved that.
Five yes.
All right, 7C, amend city code to adjust the sanitary sewer fees and charges. An ordinance for the first reading.
Motion to consider the first reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please vote.
Five yes, an ordinance amending the city code of the city of West Des Moines, Iowa by amending Title VII Public Ways, Chapter 8C pertaining to sanitary sewer service charges.
Motion to approve the first reading.
Second.
Please vote.
Five yes.
Item 7D, classification and compensation study for non-union employees, acceptance of the McGrath Human Resources Group executive report, and authorize city manager discretion to implement aspects of the 2024 classification and compensation study for non-union employees, city initiated.
I'd like to introduce Victoria McGrath. She's been working with us for many months to do this. It's very complex challenge getting with all our different businesses and all our different positions, and to getting the comparisons of like almost 40 different entities. So they've been in service or business since 2000 and public agencies, and have 600 clients in over 40 states. So take it away, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Although it's pretty hard to follow the agenda of painted steel final and sanitary sewers, but we're going to talk about compensation. So I am Dr. Victoria McGrath. I'm CEO of McGrath Human Resources, and as the city manager indicated, we've been in business since the year 2000, so we're celebrating our 24th year in business. There's two sides to the business. McGrath Consulting Group, Inc. is the parent company that does public safety consulting. So we do police, fire, EMS, and dispatch. And then we broke out to McGrath Human Resources Group in 2012 because people thought we only did police, fire, EMS, and dispatch, where we actually work with human resources from the county level on down. We are in 40 different states, and so therefore we have a very wide perspective about municipal government. Before we talk about the compensation plan, I just want to talk a little about the evolution of compensation that's happened since 2020. Beginning before the pandemic, probably around 2018 or 2019, we started seeing what we call the silver tsunami. And none of you on this panel are old enough to know what that is, but it's people that are, baby boomers that are starting to leave the workplace. And so we were starting to see some labor shortages even before the pandemic even occurred. The pandemic made it worse. And by that we had, kind of an exodus out of the workforce because people found different ways in which they wanted to work. Prior to this, government was a very sought after type of job because government had average types of salaries, but we had really, really, really good benefits. And over the years, what's happened is those average salaries have stayed, but those benefits have continued to be eroding. So then you've got the pandemic that comes in, and not only do we have different ways in which we want to work, but government is no longer attractive, not only because of the benefit perspective, but from the fact that we don't offer a lot of the types of opportunities for employment that a private sector can. Most jobs in government are not able to be done with your pajamas in front of your computer in your living room. It's very hard for a police officer to look at things or for a public works worker to work on the roads from their home. So government is becoming less attractive as an employer. And then we have what's called inflation. And now what we're looking at is not only do we have average salaries, but those average salaries are not keeping pace with the economy. So there's a lot of factors that are going into municipal government compensation that we really need to take into consideration when looking at compensation plans. A couple things about your organization, which I think is very interesting. 74% of your workforce has less than 5 years of service. That is a lot. Now, some of that's from turnover, a lot of that is from retirements, but you have a very young workforce. And the question becomes, when 47% of that is under the age of 40, what are you going to do to keep them here? I had a client that called the generation under 40 my shiny object generation, because they're going to chase that shiny object. And if you're offering $2 or $3 across the street, even if it's a totally different career, I might be jumping for it because it's something that I want to do. Or if all of my friends decide the shiny object is let's move to California, then we're all going to move to California. We don't have the same type of roots that other folks have that want to keep us within the community that we're working. You've got 29% of your workforce is over the age of 50. That means you've got a lot of knowledge that's going to be walking out the door in the next 5 to 10 years. And what are you going to do? A, not only recruit people to be here, but B, what are you going to do with the folks that have less than 5 years of service? What are you going to do to keep them here? And C, what are you going to start doing in succession planning to make sure as that knowledge walks out the door, you have competent folks behind them? So what were we asked to do? We were asked to look at classification and compensation study of all public employees. We did do compensation for all employees, union, non-union. However, with the union information, it has only been provided to the city to be potentially used in upcoming contract negotiations. By the time those contracts come up, you might have to do a dipstick and take a look and refresh that data. So yes, we did get that data, but we did nothing with it. Based upon the study, look at analysis and compare how you look with your comparable organizations. Then make sure we look at salaries and what kind of salary structure should you have, and then obviously make a recommendation to that. How we did this? We did interviews with administration and department leaders. We need to understand the city of West Des Moines. Just because it's an equipment operator or if it's a engineer, that doesn't mean what they do here is very, the same as every place else. And so we met with them. We reviewed data from your current compensation system, which is quite interesting. We had employees complete something called a position questionnaire. A position questionnaire is a document that employees complete, supervisors review it. It evaluates a job into 13 different competencies. It assigns points to those competencies, and that is one way out of 4 in which we can compare and contrast positions. So some people will say, well, why do you have a secretary in the same pay grade as a planning tech? Well, that's because, at least from one perspective, the points or the types of responsibilities they have might point out to be similar. We collected data from a number of organizations, and the list continued to grow with the county, and I will show you that list in just a minute. And then obviously we reviewed the positions with department directors. This is your list of comparables, and needless to say, it's quite an extensive list. We usually try to stick to maybe 15 comps, and we went way beyond that. So it did take us a little bit longer because we do not send out compensation surveys anymore. We find HR people just don't drop everything on their desk to complete them. First, you're also limited to the number of positions that you can reasonably put on a survey. So we asked every one of these organizations for their salary schedules. We also asked them for what people are actually making, and then we find what the positions that align. And so it takes us significantly longer in order to make sure that those positions align with that. We did receive 100% participation, which is also unusual, by the way.
Could I ask a question on that last slide?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Go for it.
Two questions that initially come to mind. First is, was there any weighting to how, for example, I don't know, let's say the city of Clive was weighted a little bit more than Edina, Minnesota, or that, Ankeny, given it's in the metro, is weighted more than, I don't know, Blaine, Minnesota. Any weighting, or are they all weighted the same?
We do not weight because there is no proven way to weight municipalities. There's some consultants that do weight, but that's something that they've made up on their own. We instead, what we do is we do a statistical analysis around the average, so we will eliminate any outliers that go at least 1 or 2 standard deviations outside. So if a Clive is, everyone's making $30,000 and Clive comes in at 70, that's most likely going to be knocked out, because it's beyond that standard deviation, or vice versa. If it's too low, it's knocked out. My line for the past 24 years is that elected officials want me to put all the low municipalities in, employees want me to put all the high municipalities in, and that'll make either one of you happy. So although we do not weight, we will eliminate anything that's outside to make sure that we're not skewing that average in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. And then my second question is, when you say added later, the first group primarily, not exclusively, appears to be Iowa-based, but then those added later were, it appears, exclusively outside of Iowa. What was the basis for adding?
More in line with your recreation Parks.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
The list was initially, we developed the list first by talking with administration. When we met with each department director, we asked them the questions, so we actually do track what comps are by department. And then we make our recommendation of what that list should look like for the city to approve before we actually start collecting data.
I'd like to say that I like the fact that that the list of comparables you put together, because to me, this is a perfect example of places that our employees could go to work. Okay? It's not unreasonable for somebody to say, hey, I can get a job as an engineer, over in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and the family decides, yeah, go for it, and they might move. Or City of Clive, or, Ramsey County, Minnesota. So I think it's perfect example of that the net that covers our employees. Even if their families are all from here, you're not talking about a 4 or 5 hour drive to any of these places. So it's realistic that somebody could move there and still be able to be close to family.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the list you put together.
Thank you. With the help of the city, of course. When we're comparing salaries, one of the things that we do is we call something called a comp ratio. It's the ratio of, let's say, the minimum compared to the average market minimum. We used to have a range. We used to say if you were 10% above or below that average market rate, you were in line. However, with the way the economy is going, we've now basically said if you're at least 5% below the market, you're no longer competitive anymore. So we look at a comp ratio of 45% and above, saying that the position is competitive with the external market. So when it comes from a market basis, actually the city's done very well. When you look at that list of comps, we have 37% of the benchmark positions that are considered to be under that 45% comp ratio and need to be looked or realigned. This is not unusual. There's always positions that somehow within the market have, we've gotten a shortage of positions, or, right now, for example, it's hard to find a number of positions that we would typically find in government. 63%, however, are aligned. And so that's one of the reasons why when you look at the recommended salary schedule, there's not a huge cost to implementation because you do have a number of the positions that are already aligned. The midpoint of a salary schedule should typically represent the average market rate. It means that a person should reach that average market rate within 3 to 5 years. It means I'm fully capable and competent of doing the job. We look to see if the midpoint of your salary schedule is representative of that. And for 65% of the position, it does align with that. So again, your salary schedule wasn't that far off, but there is some changes that need to be made. We look at the maximum. Maximum is the same way. I don't put a lot of stock into maximums because salary structures are built all over the place. Even I build salary schedules that have only 25% between a minimum and maximum to 65% between minimum and maximum. So it really depends upon the goal of that salary schedule as to whether or not that maximum is there. The other thing we look at is salary schedules sometimes can be very misleading. That means they could be very on target to the market. They could be very off the market. But the question is becoming, how do your employees then move through that salary schedule, and are they maintaining that? And here 79% are aligned with the market. Now you do have a number of positions in the 30 to 44% comp ratio, and that 18% is not alarming to me because remember I said you have almost 75% of your employees are under less than 5 years of experience. I would expect them to be at the lower end of that salary range because they are new to the organization. Just as the fact that you do have some longer tenured employees, so having folks above 60% isn't unrealistic either due to some of the tenure of individuals that you have. So overall, the incumbents have been keeping up with the salary schedule. I was asked, based upon a conversation that apparently you folks have, is how do you relate specifically just to the Iowa comps? So on that list, we looked at only Iowa. You are actually not that bad. You're pretty good. You do have 17% of the benchmark positions that are below that 45% comp ratio, which means they need to be better aligned with your Iowa comps. 83% of the benchmark positions are either at or above the average market rate. Now, that means they're at the 45% to about the 60. You really are not the leader in the area, so you're not, there's nothing that's at the 70, 80th percentile that you're running away with saying, hey, we got to come here, but you are keeping yourself in pace with the Iowa market. And considering the size of the city you are and the opportunities that people have for employment here, it's a good position to be at. All right, your current salary schedule is a little bit of a problematic. You do have 7 salary schedules in total. 5 of them are union schedules. The only thing we looked at with the union schedules is in relationship to the non-union positions, whether there was either internal equity or there was compression issues. Because a lot of times compression will occur with when the unions get certain types of increases. I'll pick on police and fire, where you get percentage increase to the salary schedule, then you get the step increase. If that doesn't keep up with the non-union schedule, you get compression, and the question becomes, why should I move to an officer position of a deputy chief or a sergeant or a lieutenant when I'm going to take a pay cut to do that? So we did look at that when constructing the non-union schedule. The salary schedules have not been increased on a consistent basis, and even though they haven't, you are still keeping up with the external market. And so employees only receive the merit. And so the merit has to some extent kept pace in the past, but what we did find is for newer employees, because the salary schedules have not been kept up inconsistently. If you are a brand new employee now, and I look at the percentage, the salary schedule increases versus my merit, I never move. And there's an example in the report where if I take the schedule right now and I look at what you've done, if it's a 4% increase to the salary schedule along with about a 3.5% merit increase, I never get to the midpoint of the salary range. That obviously wasn't true in the past, but that's something that's occurring now. The other problem you have with the salary schedule is the salary schedules really were not built together. So you have B22s and B23s, and if you look at some of them in a B24, and some of the B23s have the same salary range as a B22. Every now and then you might have a B22 that's even higher than a B24, and there's just no consistency. So it was very hard to align positions. I'm not sure how you do it now, but it's very hard to align positions because the salary ranges are kind of all over the place and they don't make a lot of sense. So cleaning it up and kind of blowing it up and starting all over again is now giving you a good infrastructure, a good base in which to start with. All right, when it comes to compensation philosophy, one of the questions we always have is, where do you want to be within the market? Do you want to lead the market? Do you want to be the average, or do you want to lag the market? I will tell you this, the Midwest is starting to gain traction on leading the market. I am working with more organizations in Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, that are saying we can no longer stand to be average. So we're going to build our schedules at the 55th, the 60th, or the 70th percentiles. However, this schedule is built on the average market rate. We did do some number crunching with what it would be if we were at the 60th percentile or the 70th, and the city chose that that was a little bit too aggressive at this point in time, and so therefore what you see is based upon the average market rate. So what we have done is we've built a compensation system based upon the average. It is a salary range, so it looks very different. One of the things that is very different is the positions are placed, and I'll talk about that just a second, on 4 different criteria. It's not just one thing. So you're going to find that the positions may not align anymore with positions that I currently used to be in the same pay grade with, because it really is a very, very different system. The initial salary schedule was built with union and non-union together. That helped me look at a lot of the compression issues between the union and non-union positions. The union positions were pulled out after the first salary schedule because we started doing the different variation with percentiles, and I couldn't keep up with the union and non-union, so they got pulled out completely. There are basically 3 potential increases. One, basically, you do need to keep the health of that salary schedule. So annually, that salary schedule needs to increase. You still have your merit increase. And then we've also built in some benchmarks for human resources to take a look at people and saying, hey, if I'm moving through that salary range, am I actually moving through it? So if I'm Susie and I've been here for 10 years and I'm still below the market rate, why is that? Well, there's no reason. Susie's been a good employee, then we might be then suggesting an in-range adjustment to get Susie within that range. But if you're looking at it and it's Karen, and Karen's under the same situation, and looking back at the evaluations, Karen has acted like a Karen, there's a reason why Karen is lower within that salary range, and therefore an in-range adjustment is not necessarily recommended. As I said, there's 4 criteria in which we look at. The first is the position questionnaires. That gives us a position analysis. It gives us a point factor system, and we group positions with similar points together. After that, we look at market. So you might have positions with similar points, but they end up in different pay grades because the market dictates that it needs to be moved to different pay grades. We then have internal comparability. Are the positions similar? I might have 4 supervisors, and I put 2 of them in one pay grade, 2 of them in the other, and the department director says, no, they're all equal in my department. They're all cross-trained. For internal comparability purposes, we want them all within the same pay grade. And the last one is compression. So it's not just one thing that people look at and say, aha, that's where I should be placed. Or I get this all the time. I know so-and-so down the street makes, more than I do. Well, they might. But in the average market rate, this is where it needs to be. So how I place them is that I place them, anybody below the minimum of the salary range is now placed to the minimum of the salary range, regardless of how long they've been here. And if they're above the minimum, I did not give them an increase. I do not need to because they are already within the salary range and it doesn't cost you anything to get them in there. That is something that the city is going to have to take a look at because there are people that didn't get an increase, and the question is when you're implementing, are you going to give those folks an increase or you just gave them an increase, right? July 1? Did you just give them an increase? I don't remember. And so they may not need an increase at this point in time. What does happen, though, is something that's called in-range compression, because your salary ranges were here. I've shifted them. So if I used to be at the top, I might now be in the middle or the lower end of the salary range. And so therefore, one of the things you need to look at for future budgets, is there any way that we should push those people further within that salary range? Number one, to clear up your hiring range, because now you have a really nice hiring range that you can't use because you've got current employees in there. But also you need to look at where their years of service in the position are within the range. We did provide the city a couple of costing scenarios for that, but that's something that you should look at and tackle within the next fiscal year. So, to manage the structure, be consistent. Pick some economic indicator. We usually recommend CPIU. It doesn't fluctuate that much. You can use the one at a given point in time. I've got clients that will take a 3 or a 5 year average of CPI and say, that's how much we're going to be trending our schedule up on an annual basis. I like splitting this salary schedule adjustment versus the merit. That way people get 2 increases. Number one. Number two, they can see this is an increase because the salary schedule has gone up. This is an increase because it's based upon my performance. And then every 3 years, you should be doing a mini compensation study. Doesn't mean it has to be as extensive as this one. Use those comps, go back out, get the market. Maybe you need to kind of shift that schedule a little bit, maybe shift a couple positions that have gotten out of line with the market. But if you do those course corrections, then you're not going to be spending a lot of money every 10 years to fix it. We did make some title changes. That's for consistency. Sometimes people get very emotional about their title, and so there was no no intent to make anybody demeaned or anything, but just for consistency, either internally or to the external market. We also made some recommendations for the Fair Labor Standards Act. For the first time since 1938, FLSA has changed some of its rules. So we do have two thresholds. One, the threshold changed as of July 1st. So the very first test is you have to make a certain amount of money, regardless of what you do. If you don't make that threshold, you cannot be exempt from overtime. And then there's another change to that. Well, that will occur in January of 25. So we've identified on those schedules and anybody that might be affected as a result of that. There will be an appeal process. We typically don't allow appeal process until after it's been approved, because if it hasn't been approved, there's nothing to appeal. But the appeal process, HR does have the documents. Employees can appeal their pay grade or they can appeal their job title. They cannot appeal their placement within that salary range, because that's strictly due to money and what's the financial ability for the city to accommodate that. The other thing we find is that people want to appeal because they think that they're a really great employee, and they probably are really a great employee, but this has nothing to do with whether an employee is good or bad. It has to do with the placement of the position in relationship to the market and those other factors. So the other thing is sometimes they compare themselves. Well, I used to be in the same pay grade as somebody else, or I used to be a pay grade higher than somebody else, and that's great, but this is a totally different system. And so therefore comparing yourself to the old system really isn't something that's appealable. There is the timing has not yet been worked out. We typically allow 2 weeks for employees to complete the form. We do ask supervisors to review the form, and hopefully we get their feedback. And then they give it to us. Some people say, well, you've developed the system, so why are you reviewing it? Look, things change. If there's different information from the time before, let's get the position correct, not I did it this way, so we're not going to change it. I will say that there are not a lot of appeals that are approved, and it's not because of my pride. It has to do with the fact that we did so much work up to this point with the city, with department directors, that you really have to show what new information has happened since the time that this study has started. So with that, I will stop talking now and answer any other questions that you might have.
I have a couple quick questions. Does your firm specialize in municipality consulting,
Yes.
or do you get into private sector stuff?
The only private sectors we get into are districts that might be private, but they're tax-based funded.
Okay, so primarily public institutions. My question is in the private sector, there's a lot of compensation that's done in variable form. Commissions, bonuses, that kind of thing. Have you ever seen an effective variable compensation package for an entity such as ours before?
We have tried working with some organizations with performance awards. We can't call them bonuses in government. So we have done some performance award ones. I think the most unique one we did was a county in Wisconsin where it's a step system, and instead of taking the step increase, they could use that money to buy additional vacation. They could use that money towards tuition, pay off their student loans, or they could put that money in the retirement fund.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Dr. McGrath, thank you so much for bringing your experience. I mean, you've been doing this for 24 years. So I had two quick questions, and they're kind of related because I'm asking you to draw upon that experience to share your thoughts here. So there's an old adage in business that says it costs way more to get a new customer than it does to retain a customer. I'm wondering how well that principle applies to a municipality like ours when it comes to employee retention, when it comes to staff retention. Because I like to think that if you competitively pay staff, say, in West Des Moines, then of course they're more likely to stay here and whatnot. But I mean, how true is that adage when it comes to a city like ours?
Sure. The rule of thumb is basically 1.5 times salary is what it takes to the cost of turnover, and that's for your typical employee. It's 2 to 2.5 times salary for public safety employees due to the amount of training that goes into those positions.
All right. So when it comes to how our city's been doing, we saw a final cost around $240,000 or something like that. Considering our entire city budget, that's not a great amount. And because we've been doing pretty good on 83% or something like that, and so now we're adjusting accordingly. Okay, thank you for that. And so I guess that's kind of leading to my second question, which is kind of based on the subtleties, the basically intangibles that you've seen, and I don't mind it being public. Like, in your professional opinion, with 24 years experience, how is our city doing in this regard?
Actually doing really well. You know, there's always going to be tweaks and issues that you're going to have to look at because there's things in the market that are going to change. I think your salary schedule is probably more of the culprit than actually your competitiveness to the external market. And by that I mean your salary schedule really isn't aligned very properly to look at it from a hierarchical type of thing. You've got the positions so many segmented into different pay grades that it just doesn't make sense. So I think that's more of your culprit. But even with that being the culprit, it's kept up with the external market. So I think you've done very well. I mean, I look at typically an organization your size coming up and standing here and saying you're spending $200,000 to $400,000 just to get yourself back in line again. I just finished, it's the biggest one I've ever been, and I can't believe they approved it. I didn't recommend it, but they just spent $9 million to update their public safety, and they handled all of the in-range compression as well. So it's a county in North Carolina. So that's, I don't know how they could afford it, but they put the numbers together and the county commission approved it, so.
Thank you very much for your wisdom and your expertise, Dr. McGrath. I appreciate it.
First of all, thank you very, very much. I am an HR executive, have been an HR executive for over 35 years. This is the bread and butter. This is the work that truly sets the foundation for this ability to attract and retain staff. And if it has not been done in a long time, there is a lot of catch up. So I thoroughly enjoyed reading every sentence of this report. I just came off of a compensation study that I did with an employer for 1,600 employees, and it is very comprehensive. And you've covered a lot of the bases here. So my question is, how do we keep up with this? Because we can adopt this now, but sometimes things erode year after year after year after year. What is the maintenance involved to really try to make sure that the fruits of our labor aren't eroded over time with lots of exceptions that sometimes tend to happen?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one is you have to look at the health of the schedule every year. So when you're sitting down and doing budget, the first thing is, what do we need to increase our salary schedule by in order to continue to maintain competitive? And then the second of all, you know, what type of merit pool are we going to have? I will tell you, merit is going away in the public sector. It's not as prominent as it used to be for a number of reasons. The first one is the amount of money. You know, it's not like back in the 70s and 80s, you know, when the average increase was 5% and I got a 10 or 15, 20% merit increase. Now we're talking about, okay, my good employee is making 3%, my rock star is going to make 4%, and I facetiously say, let's take that quarter and divide it by 26 pay periods and be motivated. So they just don't have the money to fund merit at this point. Plus, you also have a generation that wants to see what they're going to get. And having a salary range with no idea where I'm going to land in it is kind of scary for folks. So number one, you do need to keep the health of the schedule. Now, with that being said, there may be years that you have to make a choice. You know, 2008, the economy tanked, and so the question becomes, can you put money on the schedule, or do you give people their merit increase? It might be a tug between one versus the other, but that should not be the norm. That should be the exception. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, there's now a process in place in which positions are to be pay graded. You know, it's looking at and filling out a position questionnaire, looking at the points, looking at the external market, and making that decision, and kind of going back to your very first conversation, and I don't know if you do this or not, so please, I don't want to offend anybody, but if an employee gets a phone call and says, you know, I'm no longer in the same program as Janie is, and I'm upset about that, and then you turn around and go talk to Tom, or you talk to the department director, and then you start making exceptions. And again, I'm not accusing you of that, but I do see that in some compensation systems. So if you can keep the structure, you can keep the methodology, that's going to go. And then every 3-4 years, take a dipstick. You know, right now, if you're not updating that schedule every 3 years, you're falling behind. Now, maybe that'll change. You know, it used to be 5 years we used to be able to get away with, but right now we can't get away with 5 years.
And then my final question, thank you, is have you helped develop the schedule for how HR can determine the hiring range of a person based on their years of experience?
Yes.
Based on that? Because that will help us stay on track too, as it relates to bringing people in and making sure they're properly placed from the onset. Do we have that kind of schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's in there. Is it in there? The hiring matrix is in there? Yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, we have a hiring matrix. We actually developed that from a number of our clients in the state of Oregon, which
Okay.
have pay equity laws. And there's a process where you can look at skills and criteria that are
Okay.
above what's required, and
Okay.
then the type of percentage then that should be looked at.
Okay, okay. Exceptional work.
Thank you.
you so very, very much.
Thank you. And glad you're in HR.
Yeah. Love it.
Any other questions, comments?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the report and all the work that you did.
One other thing, I'd like to give a shout out to Jamie, Amanda Blackman, and Rhonda Feely for hours and hours and hours of work, and it's very, very hard and behind the scenes, and it's making sausage, and it's, you know, it's nobody, it doesn't get a lot of credit, but we appreciate all their efforts.
Yes, thank you all. All right, do I have a motion to accept the executive report and authorize city manager?
So moved.
discretion?
Second.
Any discussion? Please vote.
5 yes.
All right, we'll receive and file the West Des Moines Public Library fiscal year 2024 annual report. Are there any other matters that the council wants to bring up at this time? Meeting adjourned.
I don't know who's louder, you or Russ?
I did that